Hey, well, welcome everyone. I've already read the passage we're looking at today. It's Ephesians 6, 5 through 9, and hopefully I've brought some clarity to the first century culture regarding masters and slaves, setting up our discussion today as we talk about the impact of our faith on the workplace. And I've invited Dan Wolford to join me today as we continue our Who Do We Think We Are series. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Dan and his wife Kim are part of our monthly advisory council. Dan is also part of our quarterly financial advisory council. Dan, how long have you guys been at VCDC?
We started attending at the middle school in early 04, so 17 years.
17 years, okay. You must have been 4 when you started?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Middle schooler, actually.
Okay. Hey, so let me start. We're talking about work just by asking, Dan, what do you do for work?
Well, I'm a financial advisor and have a firm based in Westerville, and been doing it for 24 years.
Okay. And so are you the owner or part owner or?
We're the primary owners, and we have a staff of 8.
Okay.
The name of the company is Swisher Financial Concepts.
Okay. You can see their information at the bottom of the screen. No, okay. All right. So, we're talking about work. So could you share a bit, I think our upbringing when we talk about work and just our attitude towards work. Maybe talk a little bit about your formative years, like what kind of work ethic was instilled in you as a young guy.
Well, I grew up with a father who work was very important to him and in our family. He was experienced in working as many as 3 jobs at a time to support us as a family, so that my mom could stay home. So I received a lot of encouragement, shall I say, in terms of work ethic, and that sort of meant everything: working hard, being able to support a family. And then as a teenager, I went to work on a dairy farm.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like out of the skillet into the frying pan, where then you really realized what work ethic was about, working around the clock with livestock. So I was well trained in the work ethic side of things. Mm-hmm. And my dad would often say as a kid, he would flip on the lights at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning as a youngster, and let's go, there's work to do. And I would be working for him or with him and my brother. And then it was kind of a mentality of, when the work is done, you can go and do whatever else might be on your schedule. But he always would follow up if I said I want to do something with friends or whatever. Is your work done?
Wow.
Wow. So that did provide most of the foundation of where I went from there.
So work was important. Really
very important. Yeah.
We'll be talking a lot today about being followers of Jesus and how that relates, to our jobs. I think of, this series that we're in, that the first 3 chapters are identity and the next 3 are more the purpose. And so, like, why would this, what we're doing today, why would this be an important conversation as Christians to talk about our attitude towards work?
Yeah, well, I believe that, that we're all called to be a witness in everything that we do, obviously. And what you find if you're, whether you're employed or a homemaker or whatever, your work tends to provide the most interaction with other people. Yeah. So if you're going to spend that many hours away or around other people, you ought to be witnessing when you're in the workplace.
Yeah. In the passage we're looking at, verses 5 to 8, Paul, he's speaking to employees. He uses the word slaves, and he uses phrases like obey your masters just as you would Jesus. Obey them not only when their eye is on you to win their favor, and I think that implies we're to work hard, work to please them even if they're not there or not watching. So let me ask you, getting more specific about like work, how does your faith impact the way that you work?
Well, I think that there's a work ethic and a diligence that is required to be providing a true image of Christ. I think if you just think about all of the things that you do in a given day in the workplace, and you try to capture those moments. Was I bearing the image of Christ or not? And we're all sinners and guilty of many points in the day.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of that of you around here, but but I think that the more times we can capture those moments and just kind of reflect back, was I providing a reflection of Christ or not in that situation, the better trained you can become in living out your faith in the workplace daily. To the point of, slaves, masters, whatever. I think in the end of the passage we'll talk some about that, but Paul reminds us that we're all serving one master only.
Yeah.
And so as an employer, and I've been an employee and I've been an employer, but I constantly try to approach my work, and whether it's managing people, managing clients, managing money, in a sense that I'm answering to Jesus, not the client or the employee, or whatever. So, or the government, regulators.
So this might be a bit of a curveball, but can you think of an example where, you're at work and you're functioning in your job, where you were aware of your witness, aware that as a Christian you're on display in the workplace, where that impacted a decision you made? And I know I'm throwing you we didn't talk a lot about this, but
there have been many times. I remember one time an employee and I got into sort of a heated disagreement about a certain way we were going to treat a client situation. We didn't see totally eye to eye, and I let, as the employer, I let the situation get escalated too far. He's a Christian, I'm a Christian. We both said some things loudly in the midst of other employees.
Okay.
And I wrestled with that all evening that night, and the next day just called the whole group together and apologized for the situation. I didn't apologize for taking the stance I did, because I still felt ethically I was right, but I apologized for my behavior, my non-Christ-like behavior in front of the whole group the day before. And I think it certainly helped that employee in my relationship as well. And I had other employees come to me later and just express respect for the fact that I would, humble myself, I guess, in a sense of, it wasn't that the situation was incorrect. We should have been doing it behind closed doors and that kind of thing. And when you can capture those kind of moments, and I learned more than anyone in the room from it, obviously, but I know now, looking back and hearing what they said to me afterwards, some of the employees, that it's why we have what I consider to be a great environment to work in. So
now, but when you say that, it's not that everyone who works at your company would be a Christian.
That's correct.
So
I wouldn't say everyone is. It's certainly not a requirement. I am able to make it known through the fact that Kim and I will pray about any potential new hire. We talk about it. We pray. We try to listen for the Lord to give us confirmation. She's very gracious to me in allowing me oftentimes to go off the deep end. But I really appreciate her wise counsel.
Yeah.
And we know that most everyone that we've ever hired has been confirmed in one way or another by the Lord. Now, our hearing and vision isn't 100%. So sometimes we will think we heard something, but it didn't. But when we are able then to go to the employee making the offer or whatever and say, we've prayed about this and we think the Lord's saying that we should bring you on staff, it doesn't mean that they have to be a Christian. They know that we are, though.
Yeah. So you're talking then, as a Christian in the workplace, being aware that you're on display, being aware that people are watching you. Like, I'm trying to imagine now if I'm watching this, thinking, okay, but I don't have a boss as cool as you.
No.
What if, like, so like, what if my boss acts in such a way that he or she is not deserving of my respect? What if my boss, what if I work in a dysfunctional place? What if, I remember places I used to work where the norm, the culture was to badmouth the supervisor, badmouth the owner, and so how do I be a light?
Yeah.
Like, without being a jerk, let's just put,
Right.
as a Christian, how do I live my faith in that environment?
Yeah, and that, I think a lot of folks find themselves in that sort of scenario. That's where I spent the first 6 years of my career, in that type of a scenario. And I remember thinking that, these guys are going to get what's coming to them someday, but, and not being real thrilled about going to work. But I think if everyone has relationships and situations that they can speak into, whether you're an employee that is as part of a department, or at the board room table, conference room, then you always have those chances of speaking truth and light into situations.
Yeah.
And remembering that that particular temporary situation that you're in, that employer is not your master. It's it's ultimately Jesus, and they too are being pursued by Jesus. So you have to, in a way, I think, approach it from the standpoint of what Jesus would want me to say into these situations. And ultimately, I think Jesus sometimes, as he did with me, pluck you out of the situation, put you in a better, more purpose-driven situation. Or you might see hearts, changing from just your own input.
So you said something that really is comes out of the passage that, Paul, talking to the slaves, he calls them slaves of Christ. You just said, your boss does not own you.
That's right.
Slave, doing the will of God from your heart. And then it says this: serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people. Mm-hmm. And I think, I think back to working in cultures, in environments that were quite negative. I know as a Christian, I used to, and I don't know where this came from, I used to have a weird sense of I was somehow responsible for the group. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this makes sense, but I felt like it was my responsibility to clean it up. Yeah. And I think looking back that no, I think my responsibility was to just, be that presence of Jesus, or to be that light. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that makes sense, but do you want to say anything towards that? Like just the freedom to be in a dysfunctional workplace and still do it as unto Jesus. Right. Because I think that's freeing for me, that like Jesus is responsible for the group. I'm not responsible for the group. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the example that I'm talking about were my first 6 years of my career were in, like I say, a lot of profanity and some loud voices and people feeling like, nothing was going to be good enough for the boss and that kind of thing. But being one of the folks there that didn't use profanity and was expressing as much kindness as possible to people, whether they were on my rear end or not, throughout, and being a calming voice at the table and that kind of thing. Yeah. I think Jesus worked through that. Yeah. Most of the people I worked with those days are clients of mine today because of the respect, I think, that was developed in those years. Yeah. And, so to that point, it was kind of like just kind of maintaining the posture of I'm not going to get sucked into using foul language all the time and, beating down people.
Yeah.
I'm sure I did that from time to time, and I still do.
Yeah.
But more times than not,
Yeah.
I was probably more of the calming voice.
Yeah.
So
Very cool. And so before we move on to, well, a couple more here, can you, have you ever observed where someone's attitude, like as a follower of Jesus, where my attitude towards work or my work ethic, if it's a more negative one, have you ever seen that be a negative impact on someone's ability to share their faith?
okay.
Does that make sense? So if I'm lazy at work, or if I'm the complainer, or I'm the gossiper, and then to turn around and say, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian." Have you ever seen where that's like, whoa, that's actually had negative impact?
Yeah, it's kind of the age old issue, I think, with Christians that speak that they're Christian versus in action, putting it in action. I think I would much prefer to be known as walking out my faith than just walking around talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very cautious of just making sure that our actions and what we are doing at work or as an employer or whatever are speaking more volumes than what's just spewing out of our mouth.
Yeah. It reminds me of an old country song. Comes to mind. The lyric was, "I would rather see a sermon than hear one any day."
Yeah.
And I think just an awareness that the plan of God is to put us on display in the workplace as Christians, to lift us up. Yeah. I think that's a sobering and helpful reminder. I'm going to jump to verse 9. Verse 9, Paul switches gears and he focuses more on now talking to masters or employers. And he says to them basically, to be kind in the way they treat their employees. And he says this: "Since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him." I'm just curious, as an employer, what does that say to you as an employer when you hear that?
Well, I think it speaks to the servant leadership, humility that Christian employers need to strive toward. I think it's sometimes very difficult in situations where employers can become egotistical and just sort of holier than thou in a way, whether it's by position or their faith or whatever. At the end of the day, it's follow him, serve him, and be humble about it. And if it's in a situation where you're also leading other coworkers or employees, then also do that humbly and faithfully.
Yeah.
If you're in a position or purpose of follow leadership, but know who your master is.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges sometimes is because you get focused on the job, on the task, that you forget that your employees are people. Mm-hmm. They're just not, and this will sound sort of crass, but they're not just tools to fulfill that task. Like, do you feel like your faith impacts the way you see your employees? And maybe give an example. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I totally see our employees as just coworkers. We're there to deliver, relationships and products to clients who are counting on us. But I think what Kim and I try to focus most on is being servant leaders to anyone who works for our company. Just because we sign paychecks or whatever has nothing to do with our faith and authority in the kingdom. It's we're the lowest servants of all, trying to make it so that our team can actually deliver the product.
It sounds like Jesus. Seriously, like just
Well,
that he came to serve and not be served.
right.
And I think that's, is that even possible to do that in the workplace? Obviously, you need to get the job done, and a person needs to do their job, etc. But it sounds like that's a chunk of the thought process when you're dealing with your employees.
And I think there are many businesses out there that do it that way. And I wholeheartly believe that's available in the workplace.
Yeah. Well said. Well, hey, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thanks for sharing your wisdom. And so now back to you, Michael.